Lysander had always lived in his sister Evangeline's shadow. With her golden hair, radiant charm, and graceful demeanour, she was everything Lysander was not, the jewel of their family and the perfect candidate to marry into the prestigious Ellison family. She carried the weight of their parents' ambitions effortlessly, a shining star whose future seemed predestined for greatness. Lysander, in contrast, was a quiet presence, a reserved figure often overlooked in the Ellison household's grand schemes. While Evangeline commanded the room with her effortless wit and sparkling laughter, Lysander was the one lingering in the background, a shadow in the light of her brilliance. He had grown accustomed to it over the years, content in his small, unremarkable corner of the world. He had no dreams of grandeur and no desire to shine as brightly as his sister. All he wanted was peace, a life unburdened by the weight of expectation. But everything changed the night before the wedding. An unexpected accident, an innocent misstep on the staircase, left Evangeline bedridden, her leg broken, and her radiant face pale with pain. The entire household descended into chaos. Servants scrambled to fetch the doctor, who confirmed their worst fears. Evangeline would not recover in time for the ceremony. The Ellisons were not the kind of family to accept delays or disappointments. Their influence stretched far beyond social circles, and a ruined wedding would be an unpardonable offence. To them, the union was not merely a celebration of love. It was a meticulously crafted alliance, a merging of two dynasties. No excuse, no matter how valid, would suffice. It was during this storm of panic that the family patriarch, Lord Draven, made his cold, calculated decision. "We cannot afford to lose this alliance," he declared, his sharp gaze piercing through the room. "Lysander will take her place. The veil will hide everything." Lysander stared at him in disbelief. "Me! You can't be serious!" His mother, usually so composed, clutched his arm with trembling hands. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her desperation palpable. "Do this for the family," she whispered, her voice hoarse and breaking. "You'll save us all. It's just one night, and everything will be fine." Before he could process her words or voice his protest, the wheels were already in motion. Tailors worked through the night, altering Evangeline's gown to fit his frame. Servants flitted about, fastening veils, adjusting silk gloves, and murmuring assurances that no one would notice. They worked with a frenetic energy, driven by the Ellisons' looming presence and the unyielding expectations of Lord Draven. Lysander felt like a marionette, his strings pulled by forces beyond his control. Each layer of silk and lace felt heavier than the last, pressing down on him like a suffocating weight. When the morning light filtered through the curtains, it found him standing before a gilded mirror, unrecognizable in his sister's wedding finery. The reflection staring back at him was a stranger, a delicate, fragile figure swathed in white, poised on the edge of an abyss. And so Lysander found himself walking down the aisle, his heart pounding with each step. The heavy veil obscured his vision, but he could feel the eyes of the Ellison family scrutinizing him. He barely recognized himself, encased in layers of silk and lace, playing a role he had never wanted. His hands trembled as he clutched the bouquet, the scent of lilies cloying and suffocating. Then there was Alaric Ellison. The enigmatic heir to the Ellison fortune stood at the altar, his expression as unreadable as the rumours that surrounded him. Whispers claimed he was mentally impaired, a harmless figurehead controlled by his uncle's machinations. His vacant grey eyes seemed to stare past Lysander, offering neither comfort nor acknowledgement. But as Lysander drew closer, an inexplicable chill crept over him. there was something in Alaric's gaze, a flicker of awareness, sharp and piercing, that belied the rumours of his simplicity. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Lysander hesitate. He swallowed hard, his breath hitching as the first seeds of doubt took root. The ceremony unfolded in a haze. Lysander's voice shook as he repeated the vows, his every word laced with doubt. When the time came to slip the ring onto Alaric's finger, his hand trembled, betraying his fear. But as the cool metal met Alaric's skin, a subtle tension rippled through the air. Alaric's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, an expression so brief it might have been imagined, yet it was enough to send a shiver down Lysander's spine. Behind those dull grey eyes lay something unspoken, something Lysander couldn't quite name, a secret, a threat, or perhaps an understanding. For better or worse, the deal was sealed. Lysander was now bound to the man everyone underestimated, a man who, Lysander suspected, might be far more dangerous than anyone had realised. The Ellison estate was a labyrinth of opulence and secrets, a place where gilded chandeliers cast long, suspicious shadows on every polished marble floor. Every corner of the sprawling manor whispered tales of grandeur and decadence, and every corridor seemed to guard an untold story. The walls, adorned with ancestral portraits, seemed to watch with a knowing gaze, their painted eyes following each careful step. The gardens, too, with their perfectly trimmed hedges and fragrant blooms, concealed hidden alcoves where whispered conversations lingered like ghosts in the night. Lysander, under the delicate guise of his sister, manoeuvred through the treacherous currents of high society with a poise that belied his growing unease. Here, every polite smile was a mask for hidden agendas, every compliment a double-edged blade. It was a world where trust was an illusion, where alliances were as fleeting as summer rain, and he had no choice but to play the game to survive. He danced on the razor's edge, aware that a single misstep could send him plummeting into ruin. And then there was Alaric. The enigmatic master of the estate moved through his domain like a phantom, his commanding presence matched only by the cryptic words he seemed to drop like breadcrumbs. To Lysander, Alaric was an unsolvable riddle, one moment coldly indifferent, the next unexpectedly kind, and always maddeningly elusive. His conversations felt like a test, every phrase wrapped in a layer of ambiguity that left Lysander questioning the man's true intentions. Was Alaric toying with him, or was there a deeper purpose behind the riddles and half-truths? One evening, as the moonlight spilled silver across the estate, Lysander found himself summoned to Alaric's study. The room, bathed in the warm glow of a single lamp, was an intoxicating mix of old-world charm and precision. Leather-bound tomes filled the shelves, their spines worn from countless readings, while an imposing oak desk dominated the centre of the space, its surface littered with correspondence and artefacts that hinted at far-reaching influence. Lysander had been tending to a minor injury on Alaric's hand, his touch careful, his mind calculating. The silence between them felt heavy, thick with unspoken words, and Lysander's curiosity grew with every passing second. The faintest draught brushed past him, carrying the scent of aged paper and something faintly metallic. His eyes flicked to a barely noticeable seam in the wall, a concealed door in the east wing. When Alaric left the room, moments later, his retreating footsteps echoing faintly in the corridor, Lysander couldn't resist the pull of his curiosity. With a racing heart and steady hands, he pried open the hidden door. Inside, his breath caught. The room was unlike anything he'd expected. Shelves lined with meticulous ledgers, maps adorned with strategic markings, and documents bearing seals of power and secrecy. An ornate globe stood in one corner, its surface peppered with pins and strings that seemed to connect unseen plots. Everything in the room pointed to a mind that thrived on control and precision, weaving a web that spanned far beyond the estate. And at the centre of it all was Alaric's name, scrawled over pages that suggested plots, alliances, and ambitions Lysander could scarcely begin to unravel. His fingers traced the edge of a page, his mind racing with questions that multiplied faster than he could answer them. What kind of man was Alaric, and how deep did his influence truly run? The sound of a footstep behind him sent a chill racing down his spine. He spun around, clutching a bundle of papers, as if they could shield him from the piercing gaze that met his. Alaric stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the corridor, his expression unreadable yet deeply unsettling. "You're not what you seem," Lysander accused, his voice low but steady, his disguise momentarily forgotten in the heat of the confrontation. The words hung in the air like a challenge, daring Alaric to deny them. Alaric's lips curved into a faint, knowing smirk, the kind that set Lysander's nerves alight. His dark eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Amusement? Threat? Recognition? "Neither are you, Evangeline," Alaric murmured, the mockery in his tone slicing through the air like a dagger. His voice was calm, almost playful, but there was an undercurrent of something far more dangerous, a quiet power that made Lysander's pulse quicken. The discovery shattered the fragile trust between them. Lysander believed Alaric had been playing him from the start, while Alaric, now aware of Lysander's true identity, felt betrayed by the deception. Their arguments were heated, their voices rising and falling like waves in a storm, yet their gazes lingered, brimming with unspoken tension that neither dared to voice aloud. "Was any of it real?" Alaric's voice cracked as he spoke, his fists clenched at his sides. The question was a plea, a dagger, and a challenge all at once. "Or was I just a pawn to you?" Lysander's throat tightened, the weight of the moment bearing down on him like a physical force. He wanted to scream, to grab Alaric and shake the despair from his voice, to tell him it wasn't like that, but the words wouldn't come. Every accusation Alaric hurled felt like a blade to the chest, because there was some truth to them. But wasn't it more than that? Wasn't there something real buried beneath the lies? His silence only deepened Alaric's mistrust, each second driving the wedge further between them. Outside their personal turmoil, the world seemed to conspire against them. Whispers of the Ellison family's discontent grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the social circles they both inhabited. Alaric's uncle, furious over losing control of his pawn, sought to expose the marriage as a sham. He enlisted spies, planted rumours, and confronted Alaric at every opportunity. "You're a disgrace to the Ellison name," his uncle spat during a tense family gathering, the venom in his words cutting through the air like a whip. "You've jeopardized everything we've worked for." But Alaric, standing taller than he felt, refused to buckle. "I'm done playing your games," he snapped back, his voice trembling with defiance. Yet, despite his brave front, the weight of his family's wrath pressed heavily on his shoulders, threatening to crush him beneath its relentless pressure. On the other side, Lysander faced battles of his own. His family, desperate to maintain their iron grip on power, pressured him relentlessly. "You have to keep Alaric in line." His mother's voice was cold, devoid of any maternal warmth. "Do you think we'll let you ruin us because of your misplaced guilt?" The words echoed in his mind long after she'd left, their chill seeping into his bones. He was no longer sure who he was protecting, his family's legacy or his own breaking heart. Late one evening, his cousin Evangeline cornered him in the study, her calculating eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You've always been expendable," she hissed, her lips curling into a disdainful smile. "Don't ruin everything! Or do you think your fleeting romance is worth more than the blood we've spilled to get here?" Her words cut deeper than Lysander expected. He had always known his place in the family hierarchy, second to everyone, useful only as long as he served their ambitions. But hearing it so plainly, so cruelly, left him reeling. Evangeline didn't wait for his reply, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the suffocating weight of expectations. For Alaric, the nights were no kinder. In the quiet moments between their clashes, he replayed their tender exchanges in his mind. The way Lysander's touch had once felt so genuine, the vulnerability he had seen in his eyes. Was it all just a facade? And yet, despite his anger, a part of him ached for the connection they'd shared, for the sense of belonging he'd felt when Lysander was near. Their encounters became a volatile dance of accusations and lingering glances, of words left unsaid and emotions too raw to confront. Every meeting was a battlefield, every glance a silent war. And yet, amidst the chaos, they found themselves inexplicably drawn to one another. The lines between love and hate blurred, leaving them both questioning where one ended and the other began. One sleepless night, Lysander stared at his reflection in the mirror, his face pale and drawn, the exhaustion of the past weeks etched into every line and shadow. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. He pressed a trembling hand to his chest, as if trying to steady the storm raging within. Doubt consumed him, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. Yet, even as the weight of his guilt and fear threatened to drown him, he couldn't ignore the spark that refused to be extinguished, the spark that made him wonder if, somehow, against all odds, they could find a way to rewrite their story. As the weeks turned into months, Lysander and Alaric's relationship underwent an intricate transformation. What had begun as a web of deceit and calculated moves slowly unravelled into something neither of them could fully control or anticipate. Behind the veils of mistrust and manipulation, they found moments of startling clarity, brief glimpses of the person hidden beneath the layers of their crafted personas. Lysander discovered that Alaric's indifference was not born of incompetence, but of careful design, a facade meticulously constructed to navigate the treacherous waters of his uncle's ruthless ambitions. Beneath the mask of detachment lay a mind sharper than any blade, a man who had learned to play the game long before Lysander had even arrived. His disinterest was a shield, his sharp wit and calculating nature weapons honed to perfection, all wielded to ensure his survival in a world determined to crush him. For his part, Alaric began to see through Lysander's carefully cultivated confidence, peeling back the layers to find a man who was no stranger to loss or sacrifice. Lysander's quick tongue and poised demeanour were armour, concealing a heart that beat with an ache for acceptance and understanding. In their shared moments of vulnerability, those defences cracked just enough to reveal the raw truths they both carried. One evening, as they lingered in the dimly lit library, surrounded by the scent of old books and flickering candlelight, their conversation took a rare and intimate turn. Alaric, for once, dropped his mask entirely. "You think I've lived this long by being weak?" His voice was low, cold, but laced with a vulnerability that cut through Lysander's guarded heart like a blade. "I've waited, hoped, for someone who could see through the act, who wouldn't look at me like I was expendable." Lysander felt the weight of those words settle heavily in the silence between them. For the first time he saw the cracks in Alaric's armour, the silent desperation of a man trapped by his circumstances. And yet there was strength in his vulnerability, a strength that intrigued and frightened Lysander in equal measure. Alaric's confession wasn't a plea for pity, it was a challenge, a dare to see him as more than the sum of his calculated moves. But whatever fragile bond they were forging was soon tested when Evangeline recovered and returned to the estate. Her arrival was like a thunderstorm rolling in after a deceptively calm evening, bringing with her an air of fiery determination and an unshakable claim to what she deemed her rightful place. Whispers of scandal and ambition swept through the household as her presence cast a long shadow over the tenuous connection Lysander and Alaric had begun to build. The tension reached its peak during a grand gala, a spectacle of opulence and artifice meant to impress the nobility and solidify the family's standing. Beneath the glittering chandeliers and amidst the symphony of laughter and flowing champagne, the household's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Secrets long buried spilled into the open like shattered glass. Alliances fractured with every whispered revelation, and the truth about the marriage binding Lysander and Alaric was brought to light in a dramatic crescendo. It was during the height of the gala, as the room buzzed with intrigue, that Evangeline, radiant in a gown that shimmered like 1,000 stars, cornered Lysander in full view of the gathered guests. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the jovial air like the toll of a funeral bell. "Did you think this farce of a marriage would go unnoticed?" she demanded, her eyes blazing with indignation. "Did you truly believe you could replace me so easily?" Before Lysander could respond, Alaric stepped forward, his commanding presence silencing the crowd. His expression was unreadable, his grey eyes colder than the winter wind. "You think you understand everything, don't you?" His voice was steady but laced with a razor's edge, cutting through the din with precision. "But let me enlighten you. Evangeline's accident. It wasn't an accident. It was staged by me." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd like the echo of a thunderclap. Lysander's breath caught in his throat, his wide eyes fixed on Alaric in disbelief. Alaric's gaze never wavered, his voice steady as he addressed not the room, but Lysander. It was as if the rest of the world had fallen away, leaving only the two of them standing in the wreckage of the truth. "I knew about your family's schemes, their debts, their desperation," he said, his tone unwavering. "I orchestrated everything, every detail, because I didn't want her. I wanted you." The confession hung heavy in the air, suffocating in its weight. The crowd, once lively, now stood frozen, their collective breaths held as if the very fabric of the moment depended on what Lysander would say next. He stared at Alaric, a whirlwind of emotions in his chest. Anger, confusion, and something dangerously close to longing. As the chandeliers cast fractured light across the room, the stakes of the game they were playing were laid bare, their next moves poised to change everything. With their world in chaos, Lysander and Alaric stood together, facing not only their families, but the ruthless society that sought to tear them apart. The room buzzed with murmurs of scandal and betrayal, the weight of centuries-old traditions pressing down like an iron shroud. Yet Alaric stood tall, his commanding presence silencing even the harshest of critics. With an air of calculated precision, he revealed his uncle's corruption in front of the powerful elite, the evidence a damning blow to those who had schemed against him. His words cut through the room like a blade, asserting his power as the rightful heir to his family's legacy. Beside him, Lysander, no longer the timid shadow of his late sister, found his voice. Where once he might have cowered, he now stood firm, his quiet determination shining brighter than the opulence of the chamber. His voice, steady and resonant, carried the weight of truth as he dismantled the lies that had been used to discredit him. He spoke with an eloquence that surprised even himself, proving that his worth was not tied to his lineage or his past, but to the strength he had found within himself and beside Alaric. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Those who had conspired to separate them now found themselves powerless in the face of Alaric's resolve and Lysander's unyielding loyalty. The once hostile heir was replaced with a grudging respect, though the threat of society's judgment lingered like a storm on the horizon. As the last whispers died away, Alaric turned to Lysander. His dark eyes softened, the unyielding steel of his earlier demeanour giving way to something far more vulnerable. He stepped closer, his movements deliberate, as though crossing an invisible boundary that had always kept them apart. "You're the only one who saw me for who I am," Alaric confessed, his voice raw and unguarded. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and precious. "Stay with me. Not as a substitute, but as yourself." Lysander's heart swelled, a tidal wave of emotion crashing over him. Relief, fear, and the faintest flicker of hope churned within him. His chest felt tight, his breath hitching as he searched for the right words. "You manipulated everything," he whispered, his voice trembling like a fragile thread threatening to snap. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, the pain of betrayal still fresh. "How can I trust you after all that you've done?" Alaric took another step forward, closing the distance between them. The room seemed to fade away, the oppressive weight of judgment replaced by the quiet intimacy of their shared moment. "Because despite everything, you're still here," he said, his voice low and sincere. His usual mask of confidence slipped away, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. "You've seen the worst of me, Lysander, yet you stayed, and I'd give up everything, my wealth, my power, just to keep you by my side." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lysander's mind was a whirlwind of doubt and memories, of Alaric's manipulations, but also of the moments when his presence had been a shield against the world. He looked into Alaric's eyes, searching for any hint of deceit, but found only a disarming honesty that left him breathless. Slowly Alaric reached out, his hand trembling as it brushed against Lysander's cheek. The touch was gentle, hesitant, as though he feared being pushed away. Lysander closed his eyes, his resolve softening as he leaned into the touch. "No more lies, Alaric," Lysander said firmly, his voice steadier now, his eyes opened, locking onto Alaric's. "If we do this, we do it together. No more manipulation, no more secrets. Promise me." Alaric's lips curved into a smile, one that was genuine and free of pretense. He closed the remaining space between them, his forehead resting lightly against Lysander's. "Together," he vowed, his voice filled with conviction. In that moment, Lysander felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crumble. Tentatively, he lifted his hand to Alaric's, entwining their fingers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. A quiet acceptance of the love that had always been there, unspoken yet unyielding. Alaric tilted his head, his gaze flickering down to Lysander's lips, the air between them charged with unspoken longing. He paused as though seeking permission, and when Lysander didn't pull away, he leaned in. The kiss was soft, a gentle melding of lips that carried the weight of every unsaid word and every shared pain. It was a promise, fragile yet unbreakable. As they pulled apart, their foreheads still touching, the world around them seemed to dissolve. Whatever battles lay ahead, whatever storms awaited, they would face them together, bound by a love that refused to be broken. In that fleeting moment, amidst the chaos and the uncertainty, they intertwined their hands together as they found solace. In each other and together, they looked forward towards their future together.